Alright, so what a difference a slicer makes. So while it's not perfect, you can still see there's minor stringing, and what we've got are these little whisker-like hairs that hang off. So it's not perfect. It's certainly not anything like that. So I think we're still up against the limits of what happens with the retraction in the Bowden. As you can see, I mean, the back is nice and clean. Look at that. That's really good. So, other than these little whiskers, which of course, for the most part, just kind of brush off, that's actually pretty nice. So, you know. So, what did I do? I just switched from using Repetier with the in this case it was it was Slicer for the left hand side, and using Extruder 2. In this case I used Extruder 1, although I don't think that that's really the culprit here. But I switched to MatterHacker, which it turns out version 2 of MatterHacker is free. And so I had to update my Robo to use that same version, so it was a little bit of a challenge. Going from 1.5 to 2 on MatterHackers was not quite as clean as I would have liked. Apparently they didn't see the need to be able to import, or there was some interstitial version that would have done it that I didn't get. But after manually getting things set up, and then the one problem I had setting this up was the default was 3mm filament, and so initially I was like, it still doesn't print. And then I found the filament setting and switched to 1.75, and lo and behold, very nice looking print. So now I'm going to see what it takes to get MatterHacker set up for doing a dual color print, and we'll give that a shot. So, as mentioned, I switched to MatterHacker, and while getting used to the new user interface has taken me a little bit, because they kind of took a few things and buried them. Things that used to be just a single top-level button are now kind of buried a couple levels deep, but for the most part, the overall power of this, I mean, it's a nice program. I can't, it's got all the features that were there before. Just, again, some of them are a little tougher to find. The fact that you can pin this out gets me closer to the user interface the way it was, so that now I've just got these all showing up. And again, I'm just thrilled that it came as close to a good print as it did. So we'll go through and finish setting up. So this diameter setting here was the one setting that when I was initially trying to print was wrong, and that of course caused me a problem. All right, so we are going to set MatterHackers up for a dual extrusion print. And one of the problems that I'm sure they'll fix at some point, but what I'm finding is apparently 2.0 is still new enough. All of the documentation, all the help files and everything are still built around the older version, the 1.5, that I'm familiar with the user interface. And so, for example, all of this description on how to edit and align your parts to combine your two STLs into one and then assign the extruders, none of that is the same. And again, part of what I'm running into now is I'm finding the stuff, it's like, oh, that's fine. But a number of things have been buried a couple of levels down, or things that used to only take one step or be automatic are now taking two steps. And so that's getting, it's a little frustrating. It certainly makes it more difficult. So when I come in here and I load my two benchy parts, the first thing you'll notice is, where'd they go? For whatever reason now, instead of loading to the center of the bed as it always used to load, let me see if I can carefully zoom out here. I did it a little too vigorously before and flipped everything upside down. So there's my parts. They're off in the corner. And on this big bed, of course, I can't even see them when they first load because the default home view doesn't have me there. It's got me there. Well, I can fix that by taking an extra step and say arrange all parts. That moves them to the center. I didn't have to do that before, though, right? That's an extra step. Now, here's where things start to get difficult compared to the original setup. You had this edit mode, and so you would click on edit, and you'd add the other component in, and you just hit align, and it would automatically align them. What they've done, and now that I understand how it works, it's not too horrible. But basically, I've got to come in and I've got to drag select. I can't even click on both of those in the thing and get them to come up. And I now get this highlighted align button. But doing that doesn't actually, what it does is it groups things together. It doesn't really do anything else. But what it brought me in is now this align mechanism, and I can align top, bottom, center, left, or right. In this case, what I want to do is I want to align origin. And you might not actually recognize that symbol at all. So first thing you have to do is tell it to align the origins of the parts. Now it's put it together properly. Now the only thing is, of course, that it's not centered on the bed properly. I come back in, right click, arrange all parts, and now it takes my aligned part and it puts it in the center of the bed. But I'm not done yet. What I have to do is, you'll notice, of course, I can change the colors, but what I really want to do is I want to come in and select the material. So I need to select material 1 for whichever part I want to be the first material, and then I select the second part, and I select material 2. Now I have my 2-color benchy, and I have no idea where the default labels are for these colors. I'll have to figure that out at some point. Now, going back to the website again, now it gets in, it does actually have the settings, and the good news is, with the new version, pretty much the settings are all there. They're just not necessarily all in the same place. So, finding this, what you have to have is you have to have a white tower, and it does something interesting. It's got this shield thing, and I turned it on. I'm not going to try using it because I don't believe, I don't know how it'll work. I may play with it later. But under your general settings, and what I've already done is I created a dual extruder version of my setting. And so in addition to the layer settings that I had, I have the white shield distance, and I'm going to turn this off, but for now I wanted to show it to you. And I have, and I'm going to have to minimize that because there doesn't appear to be any way to scroll this thing. So this is another thing I'd like to see them work on in their interface. You have to actually close these things up because there's no way to scroll down. But you have the wipe tower size. Okay, so the wipe tower in this case, instead of being an area, is just a length and width. So it's give me a square, tell me a square, and it'll create that. So that's going to be where it does its color change. But it also has this shield, and I still don't quite follow exactly what that's going to do. It creates a perimeter around the part, and when I slice this, you'll see what it does, and it kind of looks freaky. The other part we had to make here is we had to change our, not this retract, we had to change the length on tool change. And you'll recall that we had to retract quite a bit. Let's go back over to Repetier. We'll make sure that these match. Yeah, so here's what I believe we ended up with, we were trying to do a 60 square millimeter white volume and a 35 millimeter retraction. If I do 20 by 20, that's only going to be a 40 millimeter white volume. I'm not going to attempt black. Obviously, black and orange isn't working, so I'm going to try colors that are a little less strong and closer to each other. Hopefully, they'll wipe a little better. So anyway, we've got our 35 millimeter wipe setting matching the 35 millimeters here, and we'll see on the other part. Rest of these settings are the same. The length on tool change, I'm kind of changing this globally as opposed to in this material selection, because this is really a printer setting. It just happens to be under filament. So for now, we'll leave that there. And so I believe those are the only changes that I had to make. There is a mechanism here to view just my settings. And so the layer thickness, the wipe shield are all in my dual extruder setting. Distance or loops, that I've changed globally instead of in the particular setting. I probably want to change that later. Diameter's fine. Those two come out of the PLA setting, as well as the retraction length, and then the length on tool change. So let's go back, and I think that will just clear that and come back and show me everything. Yes. Okay. So here's the part. If I come up here and I tell it to slice, loading the G code, and now we'll go to the slice view. Now, the actual print view, I love on this. You've got the ability to flip the model ghost on or off. You could show moves. You could show retractions. Your extrusion. Not sure what transparent does. Maybe that's probably just for everything. And sync to print actually tells it if I turn. Well, that actually, while it's printing, it just makes it so it's showing what it's printing. Wasn't sure if turning it off would have shown all the layers or not. So, we don't have a raft here. So you can see it's printing just the base. And so it's printing a two-color ring around the edge. It's got the wipe post out here. And you'll notice there's what looks like just another perimeter. Well, that perimeter is your wipe shell thing. So you can see as it prints it, it actually has this interesting little shell that it builds around the part. It just looks like it's just one layer. And I'm not exactly sure what that's supposed to accomplish. But what I can say is that I'm going to turn that off for the first run, because I want to see just what the post does. Now, the interesting thing about the post is you'll see that it actually looks like it's got a, it interlaces the colors. So what I want to do here is I'm going to try printing so as we're actually removing the layer. So what I think we're going to see is it does red. And now it's doing all the yellow on that layer. Probably should pull up to a layer that has a little bit of both colors. There you go. So here we're taking off yellow. I can't tell. Yeah, there goes the yellow out of the stack. Now we're taking red off, and there goes the red out of the stack. So yeah, so this is an interesting approach to the color wipe, is that it spirals the two colors inside each other. I'll be interested to see what this actually does as it prints, because obviously they decided that had a useful impact versus the two thin layers that were being printed by the Cura engine. But I'm going to go back in and I'm going to go ahead and edit this because I want to just remove this setting and restore that back to the default. Close that. Now the wipe shield is there. Bear with me again while we slice. Now we will just have the post. And I'm going to go ahead, while we're doing this, I'm going to start preheating my bed and extruder. There's a couple of different ways of doing this. Normally I would go to Control and just do everything here. And this is laid out very similar to what 1.5 had. So I just hit preheat and it preheats both. But the preheat button, new little feature here, and it's a cool feature. I hit preheat, it actually starts a 10-minute timer on your preheat. So if you tell it to preheat and you forget to come back and start your print, it'll shut off. So that's actually pretty nice too. So like I say, while documentation still needs to be updated, it looks like everything's pretty much here in this new version, and given it's free, I'm pretty happy given, of course, again, I'm used to the previous version of this. This is different enough that it's a little tricky, but it's got the same functionality, same features, and I'm able to use it on the new printer, and obviously it did a better job than anything else that I tossed at it so far. These macros you'll see in here are really neat too, and I've done this largely because I was trying to figure out what was going on with the extruder, because it seemed almost like the steppers weren't working reliably or weren't moving filament forward, but none of my tests showed that. It was all basically what this test was: take 1,000 steps at 0.01 millimeter versus taking 10 millimeters back and verifying that the filament went back to the same place, and that worked. So no reason to actually have videotaped that. All right, my hot end's warm. So what I want to do is I need to unload the filament because I've got black in there right now, and I'm hoping that's okay. Let's hit unload. And that. Well, now it's unloading. For some reason, though, my filament actually just broke right there. So I don't know what that did. So unloading the filament was supposed to, if I had my settings correct, I guess I could have shown what happened. So my filament broke right at the end, which may just be stress from being there. But it ended up, again, I don't know what the buzzing was. It didn't actually sound like slipping filament, but something was certainly bound up. But now it's pulled that much of my filament back out. So, I mean, I don't think it was driving forward, but it certainly did not drive backwards as far as it was supposed to. Switch back to the software here and I'll show you. If I come back into, I think it's in the printer. Features. Load filament length I have set at 500 millimeters. Unload filament length I have set at 600. So it should have retracted 60 centimeters worth of filament. And it said 80 millimeters a second. I don't see that should be any sort of problem. We're going to try and see what happens if we tell it to unload again. Now, it seems to be doing the job. So, maybe I don't know, should I... Oh, here we go again. Oh, well, that's okay now. We're out. The filament's actually extracted. And it broke there. So I think what we're up against is that even though it's only sat here for a day, this filament's gotten brittle enough that it probably, when it first started the retraction, it broke that piece. Then it just so happened it actually caught again and retracted the rest of the way. So that's what all that noise was about. So the retraction function works, just the filament broke on me. I'm going to go get my replacement filament and get that put in here, and we'll go from there. So I went online to see what others do, see if there's a way of loading Bowdens that actually works well. And the first thing that came up was a video going, well, just disassemble it, basically. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, that makes it a little easier to get it through, but you can already see why loading these are such a pain, because that filament is riding up to the top of the hole. And this is just, that's not the way any of this should work. So if you've got a Bowden that you've got to do this to it, it's just not a good design. I still have intention to fix this if there's room enough to put a printed part in there as a guide. Otherwise, I'll just be replacing it with something better. But as you can see, I've decided to go red and blue. Now, these are from two different manufacturers, so I'm not 100% sure the temperatures will work the same, but we'll give it a shot. So unfortunately, I wasted more than 10 minutes screwing around with this thing, so my heater is off, so my bed and extruder tip are cool. But since this should not actually run into the tip, we're going to go ahead and see if our load function will work for us here. Yes, so they've got a little direction thing. And so now it's supposed to load 500 millimeters of cable, so 50 centimeters, which obviously doesn't get us to there, which I did not plan on that, and that's fine. And let's try doing the same thing for extruder 2. This is fun doing this left-handed, but well, that's interesting. Extruder 2 doesn't give me a load function. I'm going to have to see if there's a setting associated there. So we have filament load. Let's go try to figure out where extruder 2's filament settings are. Active extruder 1 versus active extruder. Okay, so that one's active. Let's send some G code. And so what we want is we want to go G1 and we want to extrude. Let's go for 100. Whoops. First. The interesting thing is this doesn't get sent out, so this is apparently handled internally. G91. That tells it I want relative, not absolute settings. Now I tell it G1, extrude 100 millimeters, but I want to get the speed up to something reasonable. Up. And guess what? That's extruding extruder 1, even though it said extruder T0, T1. Oh, it switched back to T0. T1. That should have extruder 1 active. And now, make sure we're doing that. There we go. Now we're extruding red. That didn't look good. Hopefully that was just the reel bouncing on the support. Let's send. Yeah, still rolling. It's just that really poor T up there as a reel holder, and it's binding up and dragging. Oh, there it comes. May need to back it off just a little bit. So we got our red in place. And now let's switch back. Actually, let's do let's minus -20 here. Just pull it back a little bit. Now, let's go to T0. Okay, so I've run forward enough filament to clean the nozzle out and wipe the tip off a little bit, and attempted to get the two colors close to where they belong. I see I'm getting quite a bit of stringing at this temperature, so 210 might actually be a little warm for this blue. We'll see. But I'm going to say the heck with it, and let's go and see what we get. So, since we should be set to run, I'm going to go ahead and start the print. Grab my tweezers and clean the little bit of dangle here. And see what the chances are that we'll actually hit the tape cleanly. Still a little bit of goop on there. Okay, here we come. Border looks okay. And there, we're now getting enough to stick. Perfect tape placement. Okay, it's doing the blue retraction, and now it's going to try. What I did not hear when it did that blue retraction, I did not hear it drive red forward. And it's certainly not printing red. And that's supposed to be the base of the benchy. And we're getting nothing. We're going to let it keep going and see if the red... Although actually that appears to be in blue. So, oh, here comes some red. Alright, now the red's feeding. You know, if it gives enough red that it looks like it'll have decent adhesion, I think I'm going to let it go. This means I need more perimeters for that color change thing it does. Yeah, so our letters and our border aren't going to be perfect on this, but that's not the point of this test. Okay, so here comes the red spiral vase. Now, what I don't recall is whether or not this was the color scheme that I originally thought I chose, but that's somewhat immaterial. This is actually kind of what I wanted, was a red benchy with blue trim, so that's what I think we're going to end up with. Alright, well... yeah, we're getting a clean border. Yeah, I don't think we're going to have any adhesion problems that this thing's likely to pop off due to the problem. I do find it interesting that this slicer appears to have chosen a very different way to slice. Now, it's possible the layer thickness is different compared to what we were comparing with before. But the way it bridged that benchy label is definitely different. You can see the blue kind of hanging in there. So I am a little concerned with the blue versus red. The temperature differences may be problematic, but the red's coming on pretty smooth though, so. All right, we'll check out back on it in a little bit. I'm not going to keep recording for this whole thing. Here, see a little bit of drag off the end there. Looks like a similar problem to what we had seen before, so we still haven't gotten rid of that completely. We'll see how the rest of this part looks though. Okay, so here's our finished benchy with the color transition pad. Well, the color separation looks pretty decent. Obviously the stringing is just horrible. It's somewhat apparent that the red is probably worse, and this goes back to the potential that if the temperature difference is part of the problem here, then if I adjust the temperature so that one filament works well, the other filament may not work quite as well. But there's no guarantee that adjusting the temperature will get rid of all of this stringing. But certainly, I mean, you can see I've got a string for the red that goes all the way back to the extruder tip being moved off. Now, the one nice thing on the MatterHacker slicer that I had mentioned previously is that at least moves the head off the part at the end and parks it. So that's a feature that I was kind of missing using Repetier and the other slicers. So we'll pop this off and take a closer look, see how much I can knock off. Again, you know, you can look at that. This is a solid block of plastic, so a lot more material in the color transition than there is in our little benchy. So you can see all the transitions between you know, the bridging and everything. All the windows are full, and even, you know, the outside edges. Obviously this red needs to run at a much lower temperature than 210, I think. And you can see there's still some blue mixed in through here as it started changing colors. Presumably that's supposed to say something on the back. With this extruder, it's very apparent temperature is going to be more critical. You'll recall when we started that it did not make a perfect transition from blue to red before it started. So again, I don't know. I mean, getting two separate extruders will help with the temperature control and certainly eliminate the color bleed. Whether or not we'll get rid of the stringing completely, we'll see. I'm just at a loss for words for how poor the print quality is on this thing. Not to mention just how poor and difficult these extruders are to work with. My next step is going to be to take this apart and see what I can do to improve these. What I envision doing is adding a lever arm that attaches to one of these screw holes and will let me press that in without having to use a tool or killing my thumbs, and see if I can come up with a part that will fit inside this to guide the filament into the hole here. I don't know if there's space for it or any way to hold it in place inside. The other thing still is, you know, again, working with this, especially on the back of the thing, you can see just that little bit of motion, you can see how much that rail flexes. At least I hope you can. So I'm just barely pulling on this thing, and so anything you do back here, this thing wobbles all over the place. So that rail is just not strong enough. This whole printer's not strong enough for the amount of force that you're having to use to work with this Bowden. And the fact that it's inaccessible is problematic too. So again, this design just wasn't thought out. With that, I think this will be the end of this video, and thank you again for watching. Hope you got something useful out of it. I will follow up when I get some of the new parts I've ordered to try to do something different.